Goedenavond iedereen. Good evening everybody. It is a pleasure and an honor to welcome you to this opening lecture of the Atelier as Found. The Atelier as Found is an initiative of the Flanders Architecture Institute and the University of Hasselt. And it is strongly related to the exhibition As Found, Experiments in Preservation. And that exhibition is open, you can visit it in the main exhibition hall of the Singel. And the subtitle of that exhibition, Experiments in Preservation, refers to the publication Experimental Preservation by Jorge Otero Pailos. Together with my co-curators, Piep Leevoet of the University of Hasselt and Julia Ertas from the Flanders Architecture Institute, we were very much inspired by this publication. The experimental character of all the projects in that exhibition makes these projects unique, and their processes sometimes unpredictable, and the methodologies and design position unconventional. Yet, these projects, they're all realized, thus they have to be in accordance to norms and legislations. And with the Atelier as Found, we open this completely up. We want to explore the experimental character even more with the Atelier. Because in the context of education and design studios, experiments can be brought to a higher degree. The projects serve as a critical reflection on the main exhibition, confronting the built projects with their limitations. At the same time, the Atelier as Found shows how academia, on the one hand, practice and a cultural platform like the Flanders Architecture Institute can challenge one another. Within the design studios, 5 architecture schools in Flanders and Brussels, experiments were being undertaken under the guidance of the studio tutors. And for the University of Hasselt, it was Koenraad van Kleempoel, Karen Lenz and Joshua Kempe. At the VUB, the Free University of Brussels, it was Anne Verdonk and Evie Korne. At the KU Leuven, St. Lucas, mostly Ghent, it was Caroline Voet, but the curatorship of this exhibition was in collaboration with Marjolein Gijskes. And over the years, also Irene Scheurs, Mechtelt Stoelmacher, Hera van Zande, Klaas Goris, Laura Lievevrouw, Tom Thijs, Wim Goens and Steven Schenk collaborated with Caroline in this studio. From the University of Hasselt, it was a studio of Bart Hollanders, Jan de Geter and Maximiliaan Rooijakkers. And at the University of Ghent, it was Dirk Somers and Merijn Muller. Thank you very much to the tutors for your engagement and especially for accepting the invitation from our part to be in this Atelier as Found. I would of course also like to thank all the students who worked very hard to get this exhibition done. I'm not going to say the 50 names, but you can find them in the exhibition guide of the Atelier as Found. And to prepare for this pop-up exhibition, the architects of Veld, who also designed the scenography of the main exhibition, they gave a workshop to the students. They gave a design assignment, and the students were invited to make the exhibition, the scenography, only with as found materials. I would like to thank Jasper and Karel and also Michiel Hutsebout from Veld for the way they guided the students in this new experience. Some architects have experiments at the core of their projects, their design methodology and the way they work with communities and with materials. Experiments become the DNA of their practice. The London-based collective Assemble is such an architecture practice. Assemble is a multidisciplinary collective working across architecture, design and art. Assemble was founded in 2010, and since then, the collective has delivered a diverse and award-winning body of work. They always retain a democratic and cooperative working method, and they both want to make things and they want to make things happen within their project. And this is only possible because they cherish an experimental approach in every project. That's why I'm very happy that architect Emily Wickham of Assemble accepted the invitation to open the Atelier as Found tonight. Her work reflects her interest in civic projects, materials, making and crafts. In the exhibition As Found, we show the project Granby Street of Assemble as a reference project. In 2015, Assemble won the prestigious Turner Prize with this experimental project in Liverpool. They transformed Granby Street from a problem zone into a dynamic, social and livable neighborhood. Now, before giving the word to Emily, I would like to thank Julia and Bee, my co-curators. Thank you for following up with the studios and for the amazing journey that we had together the last 1.5 years. We started with ideas of an exhibition, and it became a multi-layered project, including a catalogue that is in reprint now, a pop-up exhibition in London, a colloquium, and an issue of an international academic journal, and also a warm friendship. Thank you so much. I also would love to thank Nino Gooivaerts and Eva Pot from VAI, and Jessie Bervoets and Guy Anthony from The Single for the production. As always, you did an incredible job. And last but not least, I would like to thank the amazing team of the Flanders Architecture Institute for everything that seems evident, but that requires dedication and precision behind the scenes. I would now like to invite Emily to the stage, and I wish you all an inspiring evening.
Hi, thank you very much for having me. And it's lovely to be invited to talk here and to see the amazing exhibition this afternoon. I'm Emily from Assemble. We were founded in 2010 to build a single self-built project. We make a wide range of work across architecture, design, and art, and we retain a democratic working method that tries to challenge traditional ways of working. As a group, we shift and change with newer members joining and older members moving on to other projects. So Assemble has a huge range of projects, but one in particular thread of our work is that we like to make things. In the case of this image, a one-to-one mock-up of the Goldsmiths facade in London. We like making in order to inform design, but also to persuade anyone involved in a project that the thing we're proposing is going to work. So here's the facade. And this way of working has helped us to build this large new art gallery for Goldsmiths University. But we make smaller scale work, like this furniture, for a cafe in Harrow, made from local felled trees. And we make exhibition spaces. This is the permanent exhibition space at the Wellcome Collection in London. Sometimes we provide the content for exhibitions. So this is an exhibition and play space in Nottingham. We do research into play and design play spaces, often in collaboration with our sister company, Assemble Play, which is a child-led playwork-supported project operating as part of Assemble. A number of our projects result in new companies like Assemble Play being set up to then carry on a certain thread of work. We write books. This is a visual survey of architecture designed by women from the early 20th century to the present day. And we also design and build workspaces. So this is the notice board for Black Horse Workshop in Walthamstow, London. And today I'm going to talk in a little more depth about Assemble workspaces, as I think these projects illustrate our principles when it comes to adaptive reuse. And I'll give some examples of what kind of architecture we design our workspace projects to be, but also how Assemble Workspace then directly informs other design projects that emerge from the office. So we design and run workspace for others, but we also occupy a lot of the existing buildings we've transformed. And we think part of their success is the community culture that is fostered from a tight-knit group of makers all in the same space. So this is a poster from our Christmas party. I'm performing Wannabe by the Spice Girls. And we have lunch together. The lunch rota is a massive part of our studio culture. It came out of necessity when our Stratford studio was far away from any good lunch spots or shops. And it spawned the idea of cooking lunch for one another each day. So we have a strict rota with a points-based system that allows for a democratic approach to who needs to make lunch next. So here we are, having lunch. But yes, we believe in having as little hierarchy in our structure as possible. And it's a constant work in progress, but essentially, in terms of business, we've organized ourselves a little bit like this diagram. It reads as partners at the top, but the reality is that many different people exist in many different circles. So when an employee works at Assemble for 2 years, they get the opportunity to become a partner and voted into the partnership. Partners can join a number of teams, such as the management team, who run the design studio, the workspace team that run the workspace projects, and multiple other groups, such as the new work team or housekeeping. And partners will wear multiple hats. So James is a design employee and Assemble Industries partner. Alice is a design employee and a partner, Assemble Industries partner and on the management team. And Louis is a Assemble partner and on the workspace team. But the work in the beginning, even the idea of having a collective practice, was really built from the question of how to form a structure that could facilitate members to pursue their own ideas in creating projects, interests that largely were about challenging the methodology of how a project comes to be, or how things are built, or who builds them. And with the idea that as a collective, or essentially having this collective support network to lean on, one would then be able to pursue these interests. So the formative years of Assemble as a practice and how it was run really evolved from the action of doing the work, learning from the projects themselves, and the structure that allows that to happen has kind of morphed and changed to become what it is today, landing at the current setup, which I described. And our studio has only really been able to function by having our own workspace. Our place of work as a project in and of itself defines Assemble more than anything else, really. So workspace is our longest running project. So finding a place to work in a city like London is incredibly expensive and difficult, particularly if you have or want to have lots of stuff, even more if you want to make stuff, which is really what this business and the business of a lot of our collaborators is really about. So you're likely to find yourself in the periphery, vacant lots, places earmarked for demolition or for development. You often hear the word meanwhile use. And it's much cheaper to find larger sites like this that are stuck in a kind of development limbo. And the idea is to do the work that makes the most out of this space while you have it. Whether that means building something on it. This yard house was actually built on the existing slab of a building that was there previously. Making it functionable, so insulating it. Having a very minimal fit out, but crucially bringing a crowd along so the financial burden is divided. And everyone can then benefit from the collective use of machinery, tools, and space. So this is a photo of Yard House, the first piece of workspace that we set up in Stratford on our very first site. And here it is, a bit more recognizable, and it wasn't to last forever. And in 2016, we had to vacate to make way for the development to roll through. So in the wake of that, I'm going to take you a bit through the story of setting up our second workspace, Sugar House Studios in Bermondsey, workspace number 2. It's our front door. So unlike Yard House, we're working with an existing building. We found an opportunity to take over this vacant space that was available as part of Grosvenor, which is a big developer, their redevelopment of the biscuit factory in Bermondsey in South London, which will eventually provide 1,500 homes for rent. And it's a quiet residential area, which would prove to be a bit of a challenge for a noisy workspace project. And also, as we were moving in 2016, the Duke of Westminster died, and all of the assets, including our site, were handed over to his son Hugh at the age of 25, who didn't have to pay any inheritance tax on the £10 billion fortune because it was held in a trust. So as a result of this, the whole process froze and we were stuck in a limbo for a while. But the tenants, the artists, the fabricators, the makers that we were with in Stratford, it was inconvenient, to put it mildly. And also, we were converting rooms like this into our office space. But we eventually signed a 7-year lease in 2016, which had a rolling break clause of 6 months, so the gamble paid off in the sense that we managed to make it through all the way to the end of that term without having to vacate. So the bulk of the work setting up and managing the space really had to be on a shoestring budget, which, not having money of our own, was borrowed from the landlord and paid back in installments with the rent once we were up and running. So it was a former secondary school building, so we had the large open spaces of the swimming pool to work with, and the former dance hall. So they were subdivided, and the swimming pool was covered, and new oversized timbers were introduced. Crucially, they were substantial enough to support additional floors should the tenants that were moving in choose to build out mezzanines and invest in the space. This was the same model as the yard house, but I guess made to measure for the swimming pool. So this frame that we built quickly turned to this once everyone moved in. And there was this idea that had come from having very little budget, that we only provided a very basic level of infrastructure, but ensured it was strong enough to support development that whoever takes the space on wants to do. And it then made it more of an attractive offer, keeping it affordable and less prescriptive from our side, as people can turn the space into whatever and build upon it as they see fit. Obviously, as architects, we do care a lot about designing nice spaces, but in the case of this project, no matter how good the design was, the rent of the space had to be low enough. People had to be able to move in, essentially, which was the bottom line in determining the success of a project like this. Yes. This is, a student did this, so came and scanned the office. So you can get a sense of the scale of the space. It's about 10,000 square foot, and it's home not only to our office, but our model making room, many spaces for lots of other tenants. This is the front of house, as we call it. There's a wood workshop run by Workshop East, which means that their machinery could be used by everyone who occupied the building for free, and then Workshop East, in return, got lower rent. And so, yeah, this is an image of the front of house space, which is very important for how we work. This picture is generally how the space looked. Often, whatever was in front of house would be quite an accurate representation of what was going on in the office at the time. And it functioned as much needed storage space for Assemble. And we used it, but we also used it as a space to document work, test mock-ups, model making when things got too big for the studio. But the primary function was that it was used through a booking system by anyone in the building. So sometimes you could find people working on display cases like this one, or carpenters would build one-to-one mock-ups of structures. There was this robot arm that our tenant Jason had programmed, or these beautiful turned wood exhibition plinths. So it would really represent what was happening in the wider community that was occupying the building. And the fact that you would walk through this space often to get to your own workspace, it really helped to strike up conversations, open up a dialogue. It was a platform to share ideas. And as you're probably aware, Assemble really is an architecture practice at its core. And there's a big list of projects on the website. But due to the success of how we set up our office, we then sort of accidentally became workspace providers. And so as well as Bermondsey, it's become a multi-site operation. So there's the Bermondsey Studios, which actually has now just come to an end. But while we were there alongside us, this was home to loads of fabricators working in wood, in joinery, Lawrence, a metal worker and machinist, fellow architects like Takeshi of Hayatsu Architects, Steve, the furniture maker, and skilled carpenter and fine art fabricator. And then the building was also home to 10 music studios on the first floor. And then Fabric Floor, we then set up in Brixton. It's on the 8th floor of an old office building. And here there's desk space, studio space, and machinery for those working with garments and textiles, artists, costume designers, and a small fashion label, and new graduates alike. And then there's Doneview Yard, which is 2 buildings that sit on the Greenwich Peninsula, sandwiched between the Millennium Dome and a multi-story driving range, one of which is a former pie factory that we converted into music studios, and the other a large storage warehouse that is home to fabricators of all kinds, working in timber, metal, at quite a large scale with quite large-scale machinery. So why do we take on this kind of work? Because it's a lot of work, there's a lot of financial planning, and a lot of paperwork, never mind a whole additional physical infrastructure to maintain and to care for. So it's no small task. And of course, in the pragmatic sense, this kind of business has the benefit of creating affordable workspace for us to work within. So again, it allows us a little bit more freedom to pursue the kind of design projects and design work that we're interested in. You could call it a kind of diversified income. But for us, it is more than the finance, and actually mostly the time and effort required to operate the workspace means we do not make money from it. Affordable workspace like this is extremely rare in London, and many makers and small fabrication businesses are getting pushed out of the city. And it's not charity work, but we do really believe this model offers a certain kind of richness and complexity, not just to the projects that we do, but also to the city. So it helps us, through a kind of osmosis of ideas and skills, make our own projects more rich themselves. So a small design project for which our Bermondsey space was critical was our work as part of Underline, a series of artworks commissioned by Transport for London's art commissioning arm, Art on the Underground. So the only fixed part of the brief was that it needed to be focused on Seven Sisters Station in Tottenham in London, with the curator, Kira Blakely, settling on the glamorous entrance B of the Overground. It's a part of Tottenham which felt largely forgotten, with a derelict kiosk that Transport for London and Network Rail both denied responsibility for, some old porter cabins, and a reputation amongst staff as a site for antisocial behaviour. And rather... that's meant to be a video, maybe. Yes. And rather than an ephemeral piece of art, we wanted to do something which would be around for a while. And the starting point for us was to explore the world of tiles, which has a rich history on the underground. And it's an example of how the generosity of space that we created for our workspace provided us with means to work in a different way, but to also invite external collaborators to join us. So in this case, we experimented with the artist Matthew Raw, who specializes in ceramics. So in the front of house space, as we called it, we worked with Matt as well as 2 apprentices as part of a scheme by a new direction to develop a set of tiles which would be made by hand and colored through high fire stoneware clay. The approach was to embrace the process to create a colorful, playful intervention which clearly had traces of the hand and of care. So you can see from these three images that the pigment was wedged into balls of white clay and then formed into tiles, which was used to form the surface of columns and seats. Here's the one-to-one mock-up, tidied up on Photoshop on the right. And this was developed alongside a few small moves that aimed to transform the kiosk into something that was more sculptural and had a robust enough character to hold its own on this corner of Seven Sisters Road, acting as a sign in and of itself. So this is it, occupied by Coffee Run, and the seating, which the station staff initially resisted on account that it encouraged loitering, being used for loitering. And all in all, there were more than 1,500 tiles with over 20 types, a mixture of flat tiles and 3D ones that were pressed into plaster molds, made, dried, fired, glazed, and fired again entirely in our Bermondsey workspace. So I touched on the Goldsmiths project right at the beginning of the talk, and I just wanted to revisit it to see again how Workspace enables us to continue to work on projects with a particular sensibility, and to carry that through, not just on smaller projects like Art on the Underground, but also to more conventional projects with an institutional client with multi-million-pound construction budgets. In this case, we decided to deliver as a client supply item the facades to two of the new galleries, continuing on the themes of some of our previous projects of working with materials that are often thought to be ugly or utilitarian, in this case, cutting and staining a combination of off-the-shelf cementitious roofing panels. And again, our workspace gave us the opportunity to literally produce, in a hands-on way, parts of the finished project of a different scale. So here they are being made in our yard under our contracting arm and being installed on site. And you can see it here in its final form next to the original water tanks. And this is also a shot of the reception desk with the red corrugated panels cast in our front of house, wrapped around a carcass made by carpenters who also worked in our space. So from Goldsmiths, I want to talk about the Blue Market in Bermondsey. And this is a multifaceted public realm project for Southwark Council, quite literally round the corner from our office, which focused on revitalising an ailing but quite historic town square. And the character we found it in is largely defined by a 70s council housing development, which opens up in a triangular configuration to Southwark Park Road, with commercial units on the ground floor and the residential above. And in the 2000s, it received this kind of remarkable landscape, a sort of sea of concrete pavers and concrete bollards, and it was the backdrop to quite a struggling market, but a persevering market. So there were some local champions like Russell, the fishmonger, and they formed quite a key part of the development as stakeholders. And a key part of our promise in delivery was setting up a satellite studio in one of the empty retail units themselves, so keeping it very local and everyone informed. And as our office was round the corner, we really pushed the idea that this was made in Bermondsey, and for the redevelopment of the square, we sought out to form a kind of Bermondsey workspace supergroup. So we teamed up with Hayatsu Architects, tenants in the office upstairs, who were lead consultant. We worked with tenants past and present, such as Jamp Studio, who fabricated the metalwork and signage, and that was designed in collaboration with graphic designer Stinson Squeeze, and the clock tower and the market structures were built by Will Floyd McLean, who also worked in the building. And other elements of the street furniture were delivered by Emma Leslie, a carpenter and long-term tenant. So Bermondsey Workspace was the base for fabrication and making large-scale models, as well as design team meetings. The front of house was kind of always at work, no matter what bit of the project we were making or delivering. This is a video of one of the consultation events where we took the idea of a mock-up to the extreme. So we created the outline of the clock tower proposal in scaffolding, and then we organized a human tower of the Castellers of London who form part of the entertainment. So it was a kind of spectacle of performative urbanism. It was a good day. Not a great video, but... and this is the opening day, always a kind of performance in and of itself. And even the original concrete bollards got some new life in them. So in this project, really, as architects, we were more like curators. Curators in terms of assembling and arranging materials, but also relationships. We were able to kind of organize this lineup of makers, designers, and fabricators that really made the project what it is. And here it is on an event and market day. It really is an ensemble of pieces produced by a cast of many. And I wanted to talk quite concisely about a current project, Bramcote Park, and how the methodology for this project is fed by much of our workspace expertise and also our locality to the park. Bramcote Park is also in Southwark in London, just down the road, very similar location to the Blue Market in Bermondsey. And this is a public realm project, and that we're employed on to transform a small park into a thriving public space. And similar, again, to the Blue, it needed to have really effective public consultation. As we were situated at the time, right next to the park, we could easily do things like make large models to take to consultations, speak to the older kids, the younger kids, the adults, but crucially, this is usually a white poster, but you get the idea. Crucially, we organise play events with Assemble Play in the park in order to bring people's attention to the potential of what the space could be for the local community. So we advertised the events with these posters in the weeks before. And these posters were made, again, by Louise from Stinson Squeeze, from the graphic design company that's based in the Bermondsey Workspace. And she's a friend and colleague, so working with this network of people who all know each other then makes the events easier to organise, but also more successful and fun to be at. So here's an image of one of the play events taking place in the park as it is currently. It needs some love, and the play event highlights this, but also shows how the local children really need a good space. And before we get any large design work underway, we've also worked with Lawrence, the metalworker, to reuse the broken swing to make it into a notice board to kind of keep everyone informed about what's about to happen. So we've reused the old rubber for the surface of the board and the barriers as the structure. So here's Lawrence removing the structure. And here it is installed. The notice board advertises the upcoming events in the park, like more play days, gardening workshops, and consultation events. And eventually, we hope that the ethos of reuse of materials, but also local expertise, and listening to our local user groups will bleed into the long-term design of the park, which is now approaching planning. And we're able to get the most out of the expertise of Louise and Lawrence because of all the effort put into creating the workspace in the first place. So you can see how their influence then emerges across many of our design projects. And I also wanted to mention this installation that we did at Christmas in relation to Bramcote Park, which I just talked about, because the brief for this project was commissioned by the large developer Argent, and it was to design a Christmas tree for outside King's Cross. And at the heart of this project for us was a provocation How can a temporary installation positively impact communities and environments in the long term? If we were going to take this on, we needed to sensitively gather and disperse materials, tweak the brief, and make this pot of money work harder. So we proposed to Argent that with this money, what we did was just buy a lot of existing trees, store them in King's Cross over the Christmas period, and once that period came to an end, we then plant them in Bramcote Park in Southwark, the project I described before, so that a small council-led project could benefit from a slightly performative installation, and wastage was minimal. So we think that the installation embraces the seasonality of the winter woodland, bare branches, fallen leaves, berries and damp earth, as an alternative to the traditional cut and decorated Christmas tree. There's a couple of captions missing. So in the last few months, we had to move out of Bermondsey because the lease came to an end and the process of making the space into a new residential development has started. So I wanted to reflect a little bit on whether ultimately our way of working can have more complicated impacts on cities on the long term. So we're aware that our opportunities and the affordability of these ventures arise out of precariousness, which are part of large-scale developments which ultimately tend to displace creative space, and we, in some senses, are complicit in these processes. So these figures make for stark reading. You can see that 1.5 million square meters of industrial space has been converted to residential between 2013 and 18 in London. And we only have a very small part to play in this picture, but it is against this backdrop that ultimately we would like a longer-term home, and the search for this continues. So it's taken a number of years and has been wide-ranging. So you can see the sites we've considered here, but finding a space which isn't subject to speculation for hope value of permission for future residential development is really not easy in London. So we've actually moved back to Bow, back Far East London, which is very close to the original Yard House building. It is another short-term site that has been earmarked for development. We hope that we could secure a longer lease, but so far we've not been successful. So we've taken everything apart in Bermondsey, uninstalling 9 years worth of work from all sorts of different people. It's been a huge task over the past year. And it's been undertaken with great care by Inez, our workspace manager. And we couldn't leave Bermondsey without having a large party, mainly for fun, but also to gather as many collaborators that we've worked with in this particular location together for the last time. And all good things come to an end. So it's another chapter for our workspace and studio, and we're now in the process of making the most of our new industrial yard in Bow. So we're calling it Leaside Yard as it backs onto the River Lee, a tributary of the River Thames, and it has a massive yard. And before we moved in, it was home to a large refrigerated rental van business, which you can see in this image, the vans, the river. There are 2 smaller brick buildings that we're converting into studio office space, including our own, and then this large green shed. So that's what it looked like before we did anything. And we have now moved our timber mill into the shed, and then we've divided a lot of the interior up into studios and bench space for woodworking. So in the course of moving, the old workspace was kind of peeled back, all the layers were kept as much as possible, and we salvaged as much as we could, and then we took them with us and built a new mezzanine and started dividing part of the huge space into units. And so you can see, as of a few weeks ago, the machinery installation has been signed off. So we have a working and properly ventilated timber mill. So big things are happening again, and the hiatus is almost over. And this building has become our new office. We've removed the carpet, and we're sanding back the lino floors. And a lot of this work is happening very expediently through making and doing on location, with very little drawing. And so here it is on its way. And we've got a few members of the team forklift certified. So here's Ines getting the desks in. So it's starting to look a little more livable at the moment. But I think really what we're trying to get we're trying to get the most out of this yard in the time that we have it. And the workshop is set up a little different than before. It's a bit better suited to newly established makers. So we're trying to pair up with recent graduates from universities, local schools like the Building Crafts College. We also have a vegetable distributor who's just moved in, and a stonemason. So we're excited to see what the new design projects will emerge from these new relationships for our next iteration of Assemble here. What the new Blue Market Bermondsey is, or the new Goldsmiths facade, what that new project will look like, and the people that we're surrounded by will help to define these things. But at least for the very meantime, our shared lunches are looking a little bit like this. But I think it's a good image of our commitment to seeing the opportunity in overlooked spaces, adapting to circumstance maybe, and that having the knowledge and interest in other people's craft and expertise ultimately gives the work we do its richness. So thank you very much.